My name is Alice Lee, Business Development Director in IVI. So I will host this session, Global Funding Opportunities. The session will be interpreted into two channels, in Korean and also in English. Unfortunately, most of the session will be spoken in English. So if there is a need to the translation, I think it can be heard from the receiver in front of you that if you switch to choose the channel 1. So I think Korean language is channel 1. So as we start, I would like to briefly mention about the concept of this session. So we intended to provide and present various funding opportunities that support the health sector. So through today's presentation, we want to have the stakeholders to learn about different funding opportunities. They are including the R&D for the product development and moving the product to the next stage, and also the partnership and the production capacity, infrastructure, and even the pandemic preparedness. And this event also offers networking opportunities for deeper discussion with the funders and the stakeholders. So after the very short 5 minutes question and answer session, we are going to go into the networking session. So please waiting for the networking session as well. And the Q&A session is very short, as I mentioned, it's just 5 minutes, but that is why we want to have more discussion after the discussion session. So firstly, I would like to introduce Dr. Ann Wattel, the Deputy Director General of IVI European Office. She will give the opening speech and introduction of IVI, as well as how we handle the different various funding opportunities and funders in IVI. Please join me with warm applause to Dr. Wattel.
So, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished panelists, guests, and colleagues. It's really my privilege to welcome you to this timely panel discussion on global funding opportunities. I'd like to extend my gratitude to the organizers of the World Bio Summit for bringing us together to discuss the critical role of the donors that is needed to bring health innovations to life, and also to meet today's most pressing health challenges. As we all know, the world is still recovering from the COVID pandemic and is also being confronted with multiple humanitarian, health, and climate crises. Millions of people still cannot access life-saving vaccines. The significance of health as a precondition of sustainable development cannot be overstated. The recent decades prove that advancing critical health solutions and bringing them to the most in need is impossible without collaboration, cooperation across both public and private sectors, especially in low and middle income countries where health disparities and limited access to vaccines unfortunately persist. This makes immunization programs, capacity building, and local regional vaccine manufacturing essential for both immediate and long-term health resilience. Private and public funding, whether through venture capital, philanthropic organizations, corporate investment, and other avenues, has a vital role here. The COVID pandemic has vividly demonstrated that mobilization of private capital, together with government philanthropic organizations, can do a lot. Investment by private companies, global funding, venture capital played a critical role in advancing the research, manufacturing, and global distribution needed to save millions of lives. The scale and speed of vaccine development that was previously thought impossible was really achieved during COVID-19 pandemic, thanks to this successful partnership with various players. Beyond this, PDP, product development partners like IVI, brings agility, specialized expertise, and a results-driven mindset that can help catalyze research and accelerate product development. These contributions not just speed up the progress, they ensure that health products reach the communities that need them most. One of the unique strengths of the health product markets, including vaccines, is the broad range of opportunities they represent for funders with diverse priorities. Some investors may focus on early stage of development or late stage development. Some others can focus on scalable manufacturing and others on ensuring equitable access. Whether a funder focus is on technology, sustainability, social impact, or long-term market growth, the biohealth sector offers endless opportunities. As I represent the International Vaccine Institute, with a mission to discover, develop, and deliver safe, efficacious, and affordable vaccine, I'd like to share with you some examples how we bring together private, public funding to accelerate vaccine research and development. So I have some slides, if I can see them. Okay. All right. So as you may know, IVS is a United Nations Charter International Organization. We are completely focusing on accelerating vaccine research and development for global health, primarily focusing on low and middle-income countries. As I just mentioned to you, our mission is very simple. We cover the entire value chain when it comes to vaccine development. You can see here the different countries that have been supporting IVI's work. We have more than 40 signatory countries, including WHO. Among the 40 plus member states, we have only 6 countries that provide unrestricted funding to IVI or core funding, including the funding coming from the government of Korea, in addition to the government of Sweden and among others. You can see here on the map the presence of IVI. We have our headquarters in Korea since 1997. We have expanded greatly for the last 3 years or so our presence to be a true global international organization. We have now 2 offices in Europe, the regional office being in Sweden, where I'm based, and also a country office in Austria. We are about to open 2 offices as well in Africa, the regional office being in Kigali, in Rwanda, and the country office in Kenya. And then we have another presence in Asia beyond the headquarters. We have the Hong Kong Jockey Club Global Health Institute. That is a collaboration with 3 partners, including Hong Kong University, Cambridge University, and IVI. And then among those offices, we are also working in country with the collaborating centers in Madagascar, in Ethiopia, and Ghana as well. So IVI is quite peculiar in the way we are organized. On the one hand, we are considered as a research institute. We do have a laboratory at the headquarters in Korea here, a BSL-3 certified by Korean FDA. And then we're also considered, on the other hand, like a biotech company. We produce a vaccine in-house, and then we transfer the vaccine candidate to developing country vaccine manufacturer. So in that sense, we are also considered as a PDP, Product Development Partnership. And the last part of IVI is to be an international organization. So that's why our Board of Trustees has decided 3 years back that we really need to expand our global footprint to be recognized as an international organization beyond Asia. Now, the slides here shows you the IVI's portfolio in terms of funders and in terms of vaccines as well. So you can see here, back in 2015, we got 75% of the funding was coming from the Gates Foundation with $12 million. And remember, IVI is a grant-based organization. 80% of our funding or revenue is coming from grants and 20% by other sources, including countries and private sector. So you can see here, back in 2015, 75% of the funding was coming from the Gates Foundation, which is great, but also a weakness in a way. So we have gone through a very thorough diversification process. We still have the Gates as one of the donors from philanthropic organization with $14 million. And we also have CEPI, Rife Foundation, Wellcome Trust, and others, just to name a couple of philanthropic organizations. And we also receive funding from the private sector. In terms of vaccine development, we have IVI is well established with enteric disease vaccines, with the cholera vaccine and typhoid fever vaccine. And we are now still working on those 2. These are our flagship programs, but we have diversified our portfolio with additional vaccines. Of course, COVID has kept us quite busy for the last few years, and we also have novel vaccines with schistosomiasis, a parasitic vaccine, or chikungunya, a viral vaccine with a CEPI funding. Now, the way we work at IVI to accelerate vaccine research, we work with everybody, as I mentioned. Being in Korea, we have been very successful to work with the ecosystem in Korea. On the one hand, we have been supported by a Korean government quite a lot by applying to different grants to bring the vaccine from the lab into clinic, for instance. So we apply quite often to the Right Foundation to accelerate our vaccine development, to bring the vaccine to clinical evaluation, for instance. We also have another source of funding if we want to focus on mRNA vaccine development, so we can apply to Vital Korea or KVAC for that vaccine development. And the last part of IVI is to also performing the manufacturing training program. So in collaboration with MOHW in Korea and WHO Academy, we got this award to deploy the global training hub for biomanufacturing for the last 3 years or so with the support from Korean stakeholders. So you can see here that IVI has been extremely successful being in Korea, where the ecosystem for vaccine R&D has been strengthened over time, and we were able to work with different stakeholders for COVID-19 vaccine development and also non-COVID-19 vaccines. And the second model, how we work, as I said, we're also a PDP. In that sense, we work with our own money, if you will, to develop the vaccine in-house, and then we transfer the vaccine candidate to a developing country vaccine manufacturers. So I just take the example of the oral cholera vaccine. We got the funding from the Gates Foundation to bring the vaccine from the lab into clinic all the way to licensure and WHO pre-qualification. And this vaccine is now pre-qualified, and actually we have been working for more than a decade with Ubiologics, Korean company here, and then that company is now the main supplier of the oral cholera vaccine to the global stockpile. And we have a vaccine number 2 and number 3. They have used exactly the same pathway, leveraging the funding coming from philanthropic organizations, and then we transfer the vaccine candidate to developing country vaccine manufacturers for licensure and WHO pre-qualification. IVI is not that big. We have 250 people plus at the institution to do all the work we want to do. We need to rely on a quite large number of partners and collaborators. So we work with different stakeholders. We work with the countries, government, and we also work with industry, biotech companies, and global health organizations. Of course, IVI being a philanthropic organization, a grant-based organization, we need funding coming from the philanthropic organizations, such as Gates Foundation, Right Foundation, and others. So just a summary of what we have been doing for the last 27 years or so. IVI is really focusing on vaccine research and development, and we also have a program dedicated to tech transfer and also a training program. So you can see here, since 2015, in terms of vaccine development, we were able to develop the oral cholera vaccine with a quite low cost. To bring the vaccine to licensure and WHO pre-qualification, we were able to ship more than 150 million doses. We are now trying to analyze the data to see how many lives have been saved or how many deaths have been averted with the vaccine, oral cholera vaccine. In terms of vaccine discovery and development, we have completed more than 150 projects there. In terms of field studies, epidemiological studies, we got more than 20 projects. Tech transfer, IVI has tech transferred 15 projects with more than 5 vaccines. And then in terms of pre-qualification, that's a very important milestone for us. We were able to have 5 vaccines pre-qualified by WHO. And as I said, we are also a training center. So we were able to train more than 8,000 professionals through our vaccinology course or the global training hub for biomanufacturing. And last but not least, whatever we do, we have to publish. We have published more than 1,400 publications. With that, I'd like to thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Dr. Anwatel, for sharing your insights and experience. Please share our appreciation for another round of applause. Thank you. So next, I would like to introduce Dr. André Rosenkrug, the chair of EU JEDI. So please join me in giving him a warm welcome. So JEDI is an EU ARPA organization that focuses on cutting-edge technology and also innovation.
Thank you very much, and bravo, Anne, and to IVI first for inviting me and for this very exciting work that you've been doing. In the interest of time, and also to be very complimentary, I'm going to have a radically different angle to the presentation and tell you a bit about our work, of how we approach innovation in a very different way. The reason we do that is simply because we're witnessing this incredible acceleration of time. I just wanted to show this. It's incredible to see that even the road to the Nobel Prize, even that one, is accelerating. 11 years for CRISPR, 4 years for just the recent chemical Nobel Prize in chemistry attributed to, in particular, to two scientists from DeepMind for AlphaFold. So I think that requires a radically different way of funding basic research and technology. So just to give you a few words about what we do, we basically finance advanced research programs, topics too risky or too long-term for the private sector, but with massive potential societal impact. Obviously, societal impact is always very subjective, and we're always working on how we can measure that. In order to do that, and that probably distinguishes us from a lot of organizations, and I congratulate the Koreans to set up their own ARPA-H. ARPA-H was set up now 1.5 years ago in the US, is we spend half of our time to understand what are the topics that, number one, could be potential game changers in the next 3 to 10 years. That's our horizon. And secondly, those where a concerted push can really make a difference. Just a few numbers. Obviously, we are now active since 36 months, 3 years. The idea is a bit older from JEDI, but we are active since. So there are approximately 6,000 scientists participating in our work. We have 8 program managers. We have 5 active programs going on. And we have a lot of partners with whom we either co-fund, do the joint foresight, and IVI, I can say, we are very proud partners of you, and we hope we can do much more together. In an interesting way also from a European perspective, we are a distributed organization, so it's not Brussels central. Basically, we are in all the big innovation hubs in Europe, including the UK, Switzerland, and Norway, which does not always make us very friendly to some people in Brussels, but we are the pragmatic Europeans. Just maybe very quickly on the methodology. Most of you know how it works, but the way traditional research funding is done is on the left side. Call for proposals, best efforts, peer and scientific committees, etc. We try to change that radically. And I know sometimes it's a little bit hurting the traditional way of doing research. For example, we consider today, and I know this is a big statement, that peer review is great for traditional research. It can be sometimes toxic for radically different innovation. I just have to remind you how Katalin Karikó was basically alone in her lab and a half postdoc for almost 15 years. And she mentioned to me that today, if you try to do a vaccine which is not RNA-based, it's much harder to find financing. So we seem to be repeating the same mistake again and again. In our case, we try to focus. We try to consider that speed is as important as the money we put in. And for us, the real KPI, obviously, is to achieve breakthroughs. But the most important one is, do we have the best PIs, labs, but also chief scientists of startups of our industry working on the same goals? So we don't wait for those who apply, but we make sure that we reach out to the best teams. So some of our programs that can give you a bit of sense of what we're working on. First, the one we did to really start all this. This was a program we started during the pandemic, when everybody, rightly so, was focused on vaccines. And again, I commend the work that IVI has done. We focused on the cure, on the treatments. We launched a program on COVID-19, and the idea was, can we use especially data modeling and AI? At that time, remember 2021, it was not that big of a hype as today, to basically synthesize new type of molecules and compounds with great affinity for proteins that were on the virus. Three great learnings out of that. One is we had an incredible enthusiasm because the question was probably the right one to ask from all over the globe, so we expanded our normal scope of Europe. Secondly, we were able to achieve an humongous number of new compounds which have been identified. We asked all the teams to develop three different methodologies, computational methodologies. So the assumption we made that if you come up to the same compound synthetically with three different methods, there's a great chance that obviously the affinity to the virus would be important. And we came to more than billions of compounds. We synthesized close to 900 in vitro, which was, as you can imagine, a huge endeavor, and some of them are now in clinical phase. The learnings, nevertheless, there were a lot of shortcomings. One, first, we had a lot of support from foundations, probably less from governments because the approach we had was very different. So the AXA Foundation, the Quant Foundation were very instrumental in help us making it happen. The second learning is, you know how ARPA is working with program managers who are scientists themselves and who are permanently, pushing the boundaries. They are debureaucratizing the process, but they're always pushing on the scientific advances. We could have done probably a little bit more that along the way, reforming teams, because very often we saw that several teams had only part of the solution. We want to be now much more sometimes intrusive in saying, okay, team A, team B, you have no chance to go to the finish line, but why don't you bring in? And we think these kind of building consortia, instead of asking the consortia from day one, but during the process of the scientific discoveries can be very efficient. And the third lesson for us is actually we totally underestimated the amount of work of validation. I mean, when you end up with more than 1 billion compound, we had to use almost topological methods to kind of narrow down those compounds that we would put the resources and the time to synthesize. Last but not least, we are now sitting with these billion of compounds that are all building on the experience of previous coronaviruses, of SARS, of MERS. We think that could be a great, and this is a call for potential partnership, this could be a great way to kind of have part of a pandemic preparedness platform for the future. We obviously, our resources did not allow us to go that far. One of my final slides is about what we do today. I highlighted in green those who are close to the topic of pandemic preparedness. These are all the programs that we have in the area of life sciences. You might be surprised, I mean, some are even linked with energy, but we think that synthetic biology is a very, very promising field to discover new materials. The 4 ones, obviously, the variant prediction that is based on our existing platform. I saw that ARPA-H in Korea is thinking about something similar, is how can we have cold chain more at normal temperatures or normal freezer temperatures than the ultra-cold cold chain that was necessary. One area which I think is not enough developed, we always hear about the issue of merging databases, especially in the healthcare area. And with right reasons, we are worried about privacy and confidentiality. There's a whole area of mathematics which is kind of developing into, could we merge databases and use a big data processing on that, but by guaranteeing by design that you cannot go back to individual data. This would be a game changer, not only in healthcare, but you can imagine in many areas where privacy or security is an issue. So let me conclude on that. First, we're very excited to see that Korea is launching its own ARPA-H. I will have discussions with them in the next 2 days. So probably there's room to run joint moonshot programs. I forgot to say that in the people who help us in the foresight, 40% of them are non-Europeans and many Koreans. There were actually a very famous Korean professor in our scientific council for the first program. We're also looking for program managers, but I think that is something that everybody is looking for. And we're very happy to invite key scientists to our Foresight Council. We think we don't spend enough time in asking ourselves what are the right questions to ask in order, especially with limited resources and limited time, to be able to really focus our efforts not on the issues of yesterday, but on those who are coming up tomorrow. With that, thank you very much. Again, thank you to IVI to invite me, and very happy to have the discussion during the networking part. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Andre. And I hope we have a lot of interactions and communication for the what kind of innovative approach of JEDI in the future. So next is Dr. Hoon-sang Kim from the Wright Foundation. So please give him a warm welcome to Dr. Lee. The Wright Foundation is a key partner for IVI as well, which is very strategic in the way that Wright Foundation always promotes us to collaborate more with the Korean partners as well as international partners. Please.
Thank you for your introductions. My name is Hoon-sang Lee. Actually, Lee is second most common last name after Kim, so I think Kim Lee, it doesn't really matter in Korea. So it is just a joke. But actually, this morning, this afternoon, I prepared my presentation a little bit more, less on introducing about like overall portfolio introduction of Wright Foundation, but to make it a presentation so that we can take on discussions about how we can work together in this funding space, especially in the area of vaccines. But even for, all right. But to begin with, I will start with the introduction of our foundations. We were established in 2018 with a goal to engage Korean life science industry and partners to develop and make available essential health solutions as global public goods. So it was actually Korean government ODA fundings teaming up together with funding from the Gates Foundations and with a generous contribution from the Korean life science industry partners. They came together to form a funding scheme. So basic premise is to make the best use of Korea's life science R&D capacities so that we can benefit LMICs targeting the infectious disease so that we can elevate the burden in the infectious disease in LMICs. And interestingly, the money from Korean government, from actually Ministry of Health and Welfare, is coming from Korean ODA funding. So by definitions, so it is, I think, the first ever kinds of single institutions dedicating the official development assist fundings, which is usually spent to build hospitals or buy vaccine and provide a vaccine to the LMIC, but invest in R&D so that innovative, affordable, and suitable vaccine or diagnostics and health products to be available for the use in LMICs. Okay. Oh, now I got it. Okay, I think I think the remote control is not working, so I have a mouse, so it is okay. But as for the Right Foundation's policy, we have a strong commitment in global access. So we lay out three aspects. First, any of the products that are developed from the Right Foundation has to be supplied through the public procurement process to the LMICs. And also for the benefit of LMICs. Secondly, it has to be procured at an affordable price that can be procured to those public procurement process for countries in low-income countries or middle-income countries. There can be tiered pricing for different income strata group countries, but the target should be affordable range of pricings. If it is not possible, then the companies or grantees can decide to supply to the LMICs through licensing it out. But the focus is our commitment for the global access. And in the process of funding any of the grant project, we have a very focus on access in mind from the R&D process itself. So we stress out, emphasize designing with the global access in mind from the very beginning, preferably learn from the local stakeholders, and also we are actively promoting, especially the grantees, especially from the Korean life science industries, or in partnership with R&D partners or industry partners from international partnerships to learn the context, especially the end users' needs, and also plan to integrate into the local public health systems for the use in the healthcare system in the low and middle income countries, and to engage the stakeholders as early as possible, including those of local government, regulatory authorities, and global procurement agency as well. With these approaches, Right Foundation has funded about $4 million amount of product in 23 vaccine grants since 2018. And lately, it is even including technology transfer to LMICs. One of the latest grants that we decided to fund is tech transfer grants for meningococcal conjugate vaccines from Korean manufacturer developer Ubiologics to BioVac. And both of those manufacturers are actually present in this World Bio Summit. And besides product development, and which include tech transfer, we also provide fundings for vaccine, the biomanufacturing of those vaccines. And we are planning to expand into other areas like diagnostics and therapeutics. But this year, we began our first ever vaccine development training grants for 41 trainees from 13 different low and middle income countries. They received 3 weeks online training and 5 weeks offline training in Korea for vaccine manufacturing. And on other regards, in our process, Right Foundation is very open to co-funding or collaborative or complementary funding partnerships. So from the beginning, we had quite an amount of co-funding that had been joined by other co-funder or complementary funders. And increasingly, we are actually actively seeking other like-minded funding partners to work on funding the same product development with the same goal together. But also another development that we had been observing is we had been seeing many other international R&D funding partners approaching us as well for the interest of having complementary funding relationships. As for actual co-funding arrangement, we had been finding it now so easy to have a fixed co-funding mechanism, but we are always open for any kind of a complementary funding relationship that we can work together for the same product development. And through the process, we have a very strong emphasis on building partnership in various regards, besides funding partnerships. And we are trying to be vehicle for catalyzing partnership, especially for Korean pharmaceutical manufacturers or R&D researchers in Korea. But also if there is any international researchers from both high-income countries where there is more advanced technologies that can be transferred to Korea for product commercializations, or any of the LMIC research institutions or government institutions who can work together to develop products that are more suitable and that are more ready to be seeking public procurement in LMICs. So we actively try to catalyze partnership with the institutions which has expertise in clinical candidates or capacity for tech transfer, or institution that can establish clinical evaluation in LMICs in multiple countries, especially, and health R&D institutions or public health authority from LMICs who can really make a contribution for making more suitable product for resource limited setting in LMICs, or who can work together to accelerate the pathway for public procurement, especially in those country settings. And also global public procurement bodies are the ones that we are trying very in various regards to work together with. So with bodies like UNICEF, Gavi, Global Fund, and also UNITAID, we had been making active approaches so that to share all of those grant items in our pipeline with the intention that those global funding, global public procurement funding agency can be ready to introduce those kind of newly developed vaccines or even diagnostics or therapeutics in their procurement pipelines. And lately, one of the efforts that we had made was realized through MOU that will be signed tomorrow evening at the closing ceremony of this World Bio Summit with UNITAID. And overall, we had been making a lot of different partnership with 40 institutions globally, with 21 from 21 countries. But one additional aspect that I want to emphasize is we had been making very strong efforts to find LMIC partners who can participate in our grant efforts. So we had been finding 19 institutions participating in our grant works from 12 LMIC countries. And we were trying very hard to increase the participation from LMIC researchers or public authorities participating in our Right Foundation's R&D support process. Lastly, one of the things that I really want to emphasize is our strong emphasis on end-to-end approaches for global R&Ds. So from Korea's R&D capabilities, we are funding the R&D with our budget, but also we are actively providing guidance, support for product development, and we do the support for tech transfer as well, all the way up to licensure and mostly targeting WHO pre-qualifications. But we do not want to stop there. We are making active efforts so that all these products that had been supported for product development can reach national, regional, global public procurement, which can really target the equitable access to essential health technologies. And through this process, we are actively seeking partnering with the global health R&D institutions like IVI, or even Pasteur Institute in Korea or Dakar. We are also actively working with various global PDP partners, the NDI Path, TB Alliance, MMV, Startup partnerships. But also we are making active partnership efforts with various global funders, which are listed here, BMGF, Welcome Find, Carbex, and others. Lately, we had been having quite of a proactive dialogue together with the Wellcome Trust. And also, we had been in quite active discussion, engagement with the WHO, Africa CDC, ADB, which actually we are also signing an MOU for partnering, and eventually to Global Public Procurement Funding Agency as well, as listed here. But that is for the global side, but within Korea, we had been very active, reaching out for partnership with KIDI, Korea MFDS, and KDCA, who is actually, KDCA actually sits on our board. We are actively reaching out to Korean government aid and mechanism like KOICA and KOFI, which is grant bodies, and EDCF, who is actually present here today. And also, we are making even additional efforts to reach out to LMIC's own R&D funders, like SAMRC, from which Richard Gordon is here today, and also PMUC from Thailand and other institutions from both Asia, Latin America, and Africa. And all in all, we are really trying to be a platform for catalyzing various level of partnership so that we can really tap onto capacity that is in Korea to benefit LMICs in global R&Ds and product developments, all the way to equitable access in essential health technologies for LMICs and globally. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Lee, and thank you very much for the intuitive presentation and also for keeping us, IVI, be identifying and follow through the compelling reasons of each project. Thank you very much. So next is Director Sang-Jin Kang from Korea Export-Import Bank. So I think I should say that in the biomedical or the health sector, infrastructure funding is not really common. But Exim Bank recently, mostly also, provided a lot of support, financial support to the low and middle income countries regarding the infrastructure establishment. So let's hear from Director Kang. Thank you.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you for having me today. During my career, I have primarily been involved in infrastructure, especially transportation energy. However, during 2020 pandemic, while I was working in Tanzania, Africa, I became increasingly focused on health sector. Now I oversee Central Asia, like Uzbekistan, Kyrgyzstan, and Kazakhstan, which has become the largest sector in our EDCF portfolio in this region. This has brought me here today to introduce Korea's concessional loan in supportable health sector. This is our content today. Okay. So the Economic Development Cooperation Fund, which is EDCF, was established in 1987 as a policy fund by the Korean government. Its primary mission is to provide concessional ODA loan that support the industrialization and economic development of developing countries. Through these loans, EDCF aims to strengthen economic partnerships between Korea and our partner countries. Since its inception, EDCF has committed significant resources to development projects around the world. Until last year, EDCF has approved a total of 26 billion, supporting 525 projects across 58 countries. EDCF focus is on developing countries categorized according to the World Bank's GNI per capita data. This allows EDCF to tailor its support to countries that would benefit most from concessional financing. We prioritize sectors that have high potential for fostering economic and social infrastructure. By focusing on these sectors, EDCF not only promotes sustainable development, but also enhances economic exchanges and partnerships with Korea. The terms of EDCF loans are adapted to the income levels of our partner countries. For example, the least developed countries, like many countries in Africa, receive the most favorable terms with very low interest rates, ranging from 0.01% up to 2.5% per annum. And extended repayment periods is up to 25 to 40 years. These conditions ensure that our partner countries can pursue essential projects without focusing on sustainable financial burdens. So let's take a closer look at the recent performance and focus areas of EDCF until last year. In 2023, last year, we made a commitment of 2.8 billion, funding 22 projects across 14 countries. This brings the cumulative commitment since EDCF's inception to, as I introduced, 26 billion. Additionally, the fund disbursed last year is 1 billion, and the cumulative disbursement total 10 billion. Our focus is on critical sectors that have a high impact on development. These sectors, as you can see, the transport is the largest, and health is the second largest. So, in low and middle income countries, the health sector faces unique challenges: limited infrastructure, scarce resource, and unequal access to essential medical service all contribute to fragile health systems. These vulnerabilities became especially clear during the COVID-19 pandemic, which highlighted the urgent need for stronger healthcare infrastructure and local production capabilities. For LMICs, building resilient health ecosystems means not only improving the capacity of hospitals and clinics, but also creating sustainable supply chains for critical medicines and medical equipment. It's about fostering self-resilience so that countries are better equipped to respond to health emergencies and mandate day-to-day health demands. Moreover, biomanufacturing capability in LMICs is a critical component of health system resilience. With the ability to locally produce vaccines, medicines, and essential health supplies, these countries can reduce dependency on imports, improve accessibility, and ultimately save lives. So, Korea is committed to supporting sustainable development and improving healthcare access in low and middle-income countries through our EDCF concessional loans. Please do not mind the numbers. We are updating. We have new targets, so the numbers are outdated. These loans provided by the EDCF are specifically designed to support projects that create long-term positive impacts in areas like green, health, and digital. Concessional loans differ from commercial loans in that they are provided with favorable terms, making it possible for countries to invest in critical infrastructure without incurring excessive financial burdens. This approach allows us to respond flexibly to each partner country's unique needs and development priorities. In the health sector, concessional loans are enabling LMICs to build resilient health systems and develop critical biomanufacturing capabilities. These loans fund hospitals, research facilities, and pharmaceutical manufacturing centers, which collectively strengthen local healthcare systems and reduce dependency on imported health products. Let me introduce the actual case in Uzbekistan. The Tashkent Medical Cluster is a significant health infrastructure project in Uzbekistan, supported through our EDCF concessional loan. This cluster includes several specialized facilities aimed at strengthening the healthcare system in Uzbekistan, improving access to quality medical care. The Tashkent Medical Cluster has 4 main aims to improve accessibility to complex medical treatments for solved and non-communicable diseases. By providing surgery and treatment options locally, this hospital addresses the needs of a broader patient base and reduces dependency on overseas treatment. And we also have the Children's Hospital. This hospital is focused on enhancing the quality of pediatric care and aims to provide comprehensive medical services specifically for children, filling a critical gap in Uzbekistan's healthcare system. And for the Oncology Center, the Oncology Center is designed to provide specialized cancer treatment and improve access to essential cancer care services with Uzbekistan. Lastly, the medical university, alongside clinical facilities, the establishment of a medical university is essential for cultivating the next generation of specialized medical professionals. This institution will integrate education, clinical practice, and research, creating an advanced medical education system in Uzbekistan. And the next one, I would like to introduce the Tashkent Pharma Park. The Tashkent Pharma Park project is a key initiative to support Uzbekistan's pharmaceutical and healthcare sector. This project aims to establish a comprehensive pharmaceutical and medical training infrastructure through these 2 main phases. For phase 1, EDCF provides a 84 million loan with a total project cost of 99 million. And for phase 2, EDCF loan will be 105 million, and the total project cost is 125 million. The scope of Tashkent Pharma Park project includes both infrastructure and training components across 2 phases. Phase 1 focuses on establishing the National Pharmaceutical University. This includes setting up the necessary equipment on ICT system and consulting services to ensure a strong foundation in pharmaceutical education and research. Phase 2 involves the construction of a clinical hospital, which will support training programs for personnel involved in clinical trials. Additionally, this phase will establish a hospital information system and a clinical trial management system alongside consulting services to ensure efficient operations. This pharmaceutical project, the primary objectives are to build a solid foundation for advanced national pharmaceutical education through these 2 phases, and also fostering skilled professionals in the pharmaceutical industry. The projects will promote economic development and improve public health in Uzbekistan. So thank you for listening to me, and hope to see you soon.
Thank you very much, Dr. Kang. So I think everybody knows, and it's very well known, that South Africa is mRNA technology transfer hub. And we are today inviting Dr. Richard Gordon to present South African Medical Research Center, which very proactively and efficiently work for mRNA tech transfer hub and also the vaccine self-sufficiency in Africa. Thank you.
Chris Hart. Thank you very much, everyone. It's very nice to be here. It's my first time in Korea, so thank you very much. So let's see if this works. So I'm going to be talking about a couple of things focusing on vaccines. And one of the things to really touch on is this idea of a lot of duplication that is going on and how we can try and bridge some of these things in different parts of the world. So this came out about a month before our meeting that we had in Cape Town when I met Hoon Sang for the first time, and is kind of the reason why I'm here. Not another pandemic fund, says the Pandemic Fund. I'm going to give a few slides about where I come from, the Medical Research Council. I'm going to talk about a meeting that we hosted for some of the key messages around the Funders Forum and some of the lessons that we've kind of learned when the funders get together and we talk about it. And I'm going to use a couple of examples of, or case studies about how we can, how by working together and bringing awareness about programs, we can really harness the collective capabilities. So very briefly, I'm from the Medical Research Council in South Africa. It is a parastatal organization that does research, funds capacity development, and funds grants. I used to run the grant funding unit to the MRC for about 10 years, and we fund really along the burden of disease in Africa. We have a number of different partnership programs, but I won't go into those kind of details, but suffice to say, we have signed a number of different funding collaborations with multiple funders from around the world. And when I left the role in 2024, essentially we had around about 250 grants, ranging from early research and development to phase 2 clinical trials in drugs and vaccines. And on the right-hand side, I've just shown you some of the more recent funders coming to Africa. Many of you would have heard of the Grand Challenges program, but now they're becoming quite more mainstream with Grand Challenges Senegal, Botswana, Angola, and Grand Challenges Africa. Very wordy slide, but essentially this was the start of a program called the African Health Research Funders Forum. And it was really an attempt by Africa funders to get some kind of alignment between what people were funding in Africa, because there was lots of duplication and lots of noise. I'm not going to go through each of those. But essentially think about it as an opportunity to promote collaboration, prevent duplication, and to see how we can maximize funding around certain common priority areas of funders. We've had 4 of those meetings. I think if you look very closely, you'll probably see Hun Sang over here, somewhere in the bottom right-hand picture. But it's really grown quite substantially over the last 3 years, from a very local meeting for South Africa of about 40 funders. The most recent meeting were about 75 people in Cape Town last month, where we had 60 funders present in the meeting. And the largest meeting we had was the 2013 meeting, where we had 110 people attend, around about 70 funders. We thought we would scale it back. And I think the key thing to really make out of it is it's the lessons we've really learned out of a lot of the programs. The first thing, I'll focus on the photographs below. It really has engaged communities of practice. So people that were interested in vaccine manufacturing, we would set up a satellite meeting where just the vaccine manufacturers would get together. The drug manufacturers in the bottom left-hand side was a meeting that we hosted about trying to localize drug manufacturing in Africa. It was the funders, it was Global Fund, it was the President's Malaria Initiative, it was USAID, the procurers of the drugs as well. The second picture from the left is a meeting we had on climate and health and pandemic preparedness. It was run back-to-back with CEPI in Cape Town in May this year. Really trying to get some kind of alignment between funders that I think were very important. And I think kind of the key take-home messages, which I will really kind of go through 1 or 2 of these in the slide, it really does take a basket of funders working together to achieve a common goal. This idea that one funder is going to do it all for everything, I think just doesn't really exist in the world that we live in. And I'm just giving you, the African kind of perspective, what it is like when you see it. And really understanding the environment that you're funding into. I could probably give you 20 examples where funders have come into Africa and wanted to set up their own program and didn't realize that the governments had put in several institutions or infrastructures which are directly competing with the funder coming into that market. So it's really important that understanding the local environment is key when you are getting going. And don't forget the small guy. The African funders tend to be smaller than some of the big funders, but they're actually the difference between governments procuring medicines from you or not, if you have a local funder as part of the mix. Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit about case studies. We've heard about the mRNA hub. Many of you will not know is that Pietro, myself, and Tullio D'Oliveira wrote the grant for the mRNA hub program, and that was really going from a sequence to an mRNA vaccine. And that was the idea behind the program. And you will see a couple of mentions of it. And those of you who've been at this meeting of the previous years, I think Pietro has been on a number of different sessions when we were here. But the first point to make out is that this was mostly funded by the development financer in South Africa, the IDC. So it was governmental money that helped set up Afrigen. along with an innovator bringing in a vaccine technology into Africa. So it was effectively a tech transfer. So that program, and this is a picture that was taken out of the actual grant, it was essentially building on a number of different academic programs that existed in South Africa already. They were being funded as research projects. And by bolting them together as a virtual R&D pipeline, on the left-hand side you can see from sequence to making plasmid to making constructs to the early immunogenicity. It was essentially a link of 7 academic groups working together to develop a vaccine construct. And the ones that I've highlighted in red are a couple of examples I'm going to talk about here. The one about the genomics, the one about the innovation capacity, and one slide about Afrigen, about how some of the lessons we learned from some of the case studies in the vaccine space about how we can align funding. So those of you who may not know of this program, but you will probably all know of the program, for lack of a way to describe it. So this was a variant consortium that was set up in the beginning of COVID in South Africa. And it was essentially funded by the South African government to try and get alignment and trying to get understanding of COVID and COVID variants in South Africa. So it was essentially 20 different labs, 10 academic and 10 from the government sector, working together to get a real-time COVID surveillance network. So it was multiple partners working together. And the reason why I say most of you will know of this program, this is the program that brought the discovery of the Beta and the Omicron variants to the world, which cancelled Christmas in South Africa for 2 years. But the one thing about this is it was a consortium, and it worked as a consortium. So, for example, the procurement was done as a consortium to get bulk discounts and bulk buyings for the reagents. So what ended up happening is a lot of funders were coming in globally and were trying to work with one of the consortium members and not realizing that they worked as a consortium. And that was a classic challenge that we had throughout the COVID era, when funders did not understand it was a consortium funded as a consortium, and that's where some of the leverage gets lost. So that's just the one mini example. But this really catalyzed the Africa CDC to get their alignment of their genomic surveillance programs. And some of you would have seen this about how the specialized labs of the Africa CDC, it kind of builds on the genomic surveillance program that was done in South Africa. And then what led into a capacity development program where Rockefeller Foundation, the World Bank, the ASLM, and Abbott came in to fund a network of over 500 fellows that were trained in South Africa and in Nigeria at ASGID, from either basic 2-week to 6-month to 2-year training programs in genomics and genomic surveillance. So therefore, you have a network across Africa of scientists that are trained to do genomic surveillance. So why would you go outside of this network to set up your own genomic surveillance program when essentially $20 million has been sent to train these people, and Illumina have donated a whole lot of machines to Africa? And this program works, and you will see down the left-hand side, you will see a number of different outbreaks of different diseases across Africa that have been sequenced as a result of these fellows training in Africa. Dengue in Ethiopia, dengue in Burkina Faso, chikungunya in West Africa, the cholera outbreak in Malawi, the new cholera lineage in Cameroon. These came out, fellows and scientists came out of this training program. The one that I left on the left-hand side, and it's relevant for Matthew here, the Rift Valley program. So the sequencing was done by the group in Cape Town, at Tulio de Oliveira and his group. But that is the sequence that has gone into the Afrigen Rift Valley vaccine. So the idea that Africa can be doing its own sequencing to identify its own molecular targets to go into vaccines from Africa, that's exactly what we're trying to do. And there's your second proof of concept, the first one being COVID, how we did it. Other areas for collaboration. So mRNA vaccines are the buzzword at the moment. For those of you who are in the room who know something about mRNA, it's a very, very litigious, very complicated world. Nobody really knows who owns the vaccine IP at the moment. But I think it's generally accepted that what we see in the Moderna and the Pfizer vaccine are first-generation vaccines. And there's a whole initiative now going on in the world to try and come up with second-generation vaccines for cost of goods, thermostability, and formulation capacities. So this was the first meeting. I think you will see Hani somewhere in the picture there. This is an important area and is an area that where multiple funders can work together in some kind of pre-competitive advantage to develop sort of second-generation mRNA-based vaccines. Because minus 80 is not really going to be a long-term sustainable solution for many partners. And then the last thing I want to talk about, I'll talk a little bit about it tomorrow, is capacity development. And this is a buzzword that everyone wants to get involved in capacity development. And I drew this cheeky schematic. It's actually an animated picture, but if you're doing capacity development with one training organization, it's easy. When you add in, and this was in a 5-minute brain dump, if you add in 20 different people offering training and 54 African countries, and each 20 different training organizations contacting 50 different African countries, plus the different funders, what you get is an unmitigated mess and a lot of confusion of how this is coordinated. And I think I'll talk a bit more about tomorrow in the capacity development section, but essentially the key things really was agreeing on nomenclature throughout the program. And I'll talk a bit specifically about that later on. I think I got stuck. I think my slide has stuck. Oh, there you go. So essentially what that meant was that a number of the funders had to get together with a number of the training groups. This was a meeting that was organized with IPD in Senegal. I put IVI's logo there because they were there. I think Alice is in the picture there. Where we really, what it got was A, the funders to get together and see what Africa kind of needed. B, the training groups had to get together to see what what they could offer, and not just a list of things on a website that can be done. And more importantly, it got the African governments and the different regions in Africa to come up with what is their strategy for training and what are their needs. And then at the meeting in Lusaka last December, this was presented as the white paper around the detailed analysis of the competency framework needed to build a vaccine manufacturing industry in Africa. Each region has different needs. All right, so this is another reason why we need to get calls to get funder alignment. This was taken about 3 months apart. This is not to name and shame, but essentially the WHO and the Africa CDC essentially put out identical calls about 2 months apart. So you can see that sitting in Africa, it's quite tricky to work out making wood for the trees. Do the funders not talk to each other? Do we apply to both? Are they the same thing? Are they different things? Which one's good funding? Which one doesn't? Who are the different funding partners? So I think there's a real need for funders to align in some of these areas, because all it does really is it creates, in some cases, unnecessary competition. It duplicates funding. It duplicates resources in many of the areas. But I think the key messages to come out of this is the funders need to align. We need to link training to absorption and building industry. What is in-kind funding and what is grant funding? Because sometimes it's not obviously clear. What is lab-based training and what is virtual training? And linking it also to the procurement side. Who's going to buy these vaccines and who's not going to buy these vaccines? So in South Africa, in my last 2 slides, we put together a whole hub involving Uvu Bio, the CSR, the MRC, Biovac, and Afrigen, where everyone has their own role. So the MRC is funding people who are unemployed, giving them basic skills training, and hopefully the absorption into Biovac and Afrigen and Aspen in South Africa. We are funding masters, we are funding doctoral students. We have around 30 programs around there because innovation is going to be key in how we do this. The CSR is focusing on bioprocess training for people who are currently employed, and it's real upskilling training, et cetera, et cetera. And just to give you a couple of nice pictures of some of the students that have been trained, and this is my second last slide, where our goal is to really train young scientists from Africa and secure them into the industry working place. One last slide on technology transfers, and this came up something in some of the previous discussions as well. This is becoming a very popular model, and I think it's a very successful model to build industries around the world. In the Uzbekistan example beforehand, and is the example here. However, there are different aspects to technology transfer. There's the technology transfer, there is the WHO pre-qualification, there's the clinical trial validation. There is sometimes you have to build buildings. But the idea really is around how do we get funders together to coalesce around a tech transfer, where some funders who typically are never involved in tech transfer discussions, those who build infrastructure. If you need to build a building, it would be really nice to have funders in the room who are looking to build buildings. They normally brought in at a different meeting 6 months later. But everyone has a key role to play, where technology transfer could be funded as a basket, and you could leverage off some of the buildings that are being built on the same program. So I'm just going to stop there with the OCV example, where oral cholera vaccine, which was mentioned earlier on by Alice with IVI, this is one example where it was a basket of funders that were really used to transfer the vaccine across to Africa, although that had to be raised in sequential rounds and not all in one go. So I'm going to stop there to say thank you very much for your time, and very nice to be here.
Thank you, Dr. Gordon. Thank you for explaining us the numerous but also still very focused initiatives of the SAMRC, and also emphasize the importance of the alignment. And last but not least, I am inviting Dr. Matthew Downham to the stage. Please welcome me. Please join me to welcome Dr. Downham.
So thank you very much indeed, IVI. Thank you, Alice, for that kind invitation and opportunity to speak today. Similar to Richard, this is my first visit to South Korea, so it's a pleasure to be here, and I hope to see a bit more of the city and the country in the next few days. I'm going to be presenting on something that's already been spoken about this afternoon, and that's the 100-day mission. And what I'm going to be talking about here now is what would it take to meet the 100-day mission? What's actually required to be prepared for a pandemic? And with that, I'm going to move forward if I can. Press the big green button. I didn't do it hard enough, did I? Obviously. All right. You've got the technique, haven't you? How do we go back? There we go. All right, cool. Thanks very much. So just briefly, CEPI, or the Coalition for Epidemic Preparedness and Innovations, was founded in 2017 in response to the Ebola crisis that was in the Democratic Republic of Congo around 2016-17. It was founded at the World Economic Forum in Davos as a way for funding the research and development of vaccines for novel diseases that are particularly prevalent in global south low-middle income countries. Richard's already mentioned some of them, chikungunya, for example, Rift Valley fever, Lassa, Nipah, etc. So it was a way of funding, a way of coalition partners to fund these particular activities. What CEPI did a little later, about 2 years ago, was change its vision to really think about, well, it's not just the research and development. These vaccines have to come to market. They have to go through the clinical trial aspects. They have to be in a state of readiness to prepare a world where epidemics and pandemics are no longer a threat to humanity. So they have to go beyond that R&D phase. And so our mission is very much about accelerating the development of vaccines and also other biologic countermeasures. So it's not solely vaccines, it's antibodies as well, for example, against these epidemic and pandemic threats, and really kind of be in a state of readiness to respond. So a few years ago, CEPI founded the idea of the 100-day mission. It's been adopted by the G7, by the G20, and many other organizations, the WHO, for example. The definition for the 100-day mission is, as you can see on the screen here, whereby vaccines should be ready for initial authorization and manufacturing at scale within 100 days of recognition of a pandemic pathogen where appropriate. So there's a publication that was issued by CEPI in 2022 with Saville et al., where we talked about the elements required for vaccine manufacturing. And this presentation today provides some of the summary from that paper. So, but if you need further details, this New England Journal of Medicine publication would be a good place to go. So if you think about the 100-day mission, it's all about how to achieve that maximal response, how to accelerate vaccine manufacturing, and this requires a paradigm shift. Typically, when vaccines are developed and manufactured, it can take anywhere between 5, 10, or if not more years to develop the vaccines. That's the traditional, historic way that vaccines were developed and manufactured. Through the COVID pandemic, the first vaccines were available after about 350 days from sequence availability to to availability of vaccines for the first use in humans. This is an incredible achievement, and it took an awful lot of partnership and collaboration with many organizations. But CEPI is pushing that envelope a little further. Could we do this instead of 350 days, in 100 days? Could we maximize that response to be able to provide vaccines within 100 days? To be able to do that, you need to be prepared. You need to be able to respond. You need to have the necessary skills, toolkit, components, manufacturing to be able to respond readily within that 100 days. And that time period could be any length of time. It could be many, many years, and much investment is required. But either way, having seen what we saw through COVID, there is opportunity here to really have a paradigm shift, to really significantly front load the preparedness activities and drive forward vaccine manufacturing and supply in that 100-day target. So there's certain areas that to really think about, and this is again something that was published and has been issued publicly as well previously. And there's four kind of areas. There's leveraging research and development, how to really build up those vaccine candidates, build up those critical reagents, and have the key analytical elements required to manufacture, test, and release vaccines. You need to be able to rapidly characterize the outbreak. You need to identify when that disease is really becoming a pandemic or epidemic threat, and go ahead and start or trigger the manufacturing process accordingly. And this is where the WHO declares a pandemic health emergency of international concern. And as we've seen quite recently, the Africa CDC have issued a regional health emergency of regional concern, obviously. So there's the element of rapid recognition of the disease that then needs the vaccines. Then there's the scaling of the manufacturing. To be able to manufacture billions of doses as readily as possible is not an easy feat in itself. It takes a considerable amount of resource, of supply of critical consumables and raw materials, but it's still a critical element to be able to supply vaccines in an equitable fashion globally. And then lastly there, you can see it's gathering the evidence according to predefined response pathways. So it's all that clinical monitoring, that epidemiological monitoring, the rollout of the vaccines to make sure that not only are they equitably available, but they're also having the clinical desired response. And if they're not, how do you respond? Let's say, for example, a virus changes or mutates. The vaccine no longer matches the virus. What do you do then? You have to remake the vaccine against that newly mutated virus. It's something the influenza world does every year, basically, for both the northern and the southern hemisphere. So in what way is CEPI thinking about this? So the previous slide is the kind of high-level elements, but what is CEPI focusing on towards preparing for that 100-day mission? So we're building or investing in vaccine libraries and prototype platforms. We're very, very heavily focused on mRNA vaccines, mRNA being the key thought as to where the 100-day mission could be met. And in fact, we're working very closely with SK Bio here in South Korea to develop prototype vaccines for preventable diseases. And we're using Lassa and we're using Japanese encephalitis as exemplar vaccines for that particular purpose. So we're building inventories of candidate vaccines that can be taken off the shelf and readily expanded for use against a particular outbreak. We're working on clinical trial and laboratory infrastructure. So we have had clinical trial systems set up for some time in response to the Ebola pandemic, from the Ebola outbreak in 2016, one of the reasons why CEPI was funded in 2017. But we've also established central laboratory networks and animal model networks. In other words, the key components required to manufacture, test, and release vaccines and demonstrate their suitability prior to utilization in a wide-scale manufacturing utilization. We're looking at early biomarkers. What are the biomarkers of robust immune response? Not just the immune response, the antibody response, but the cellular-based responses. There's the various hormones and elements responsive to the cell-based mechanisms of immune reaction. So how can they be monitored? How can they be improved? How can vaccines be designed to improve those particular immune responses? Obviously, as Director of the Manufacturing and Supply Chain Networks at CEPI, I obviously think box number 4 is a very, very important one. It's how to be able to rapidly manufacture and validate experimental vaccines. And this requires elements of innovation. How can we innovatively think about how to manufacture vaccines as rapidly as possible and supply them with the optimal stability? We need to have geodiversified vaccine manufacturing. As was an exemplar through the COVID pandemic, there were many parts of the world that sadly went without vaccines, went without critical COVID vaccines. How to make sure that those regions get those vaccines and can be self-sustaining in future. And then there's obviously the element of needing those rapid processes and those analytics, the assays required to test and release vaccines as well. And then there's the global capabilities, that box 5, as you can see, for early characterization of pathogens and outbreaks. And that's the recognition, the triggers, when to start that vaccine manufacturing campaign. The timing of it is critical to ensure that you've started that in time to meet the vaccine needs, the vaccine supply needs, but not necessarily building up inventory that then will go to waste. That timing element is critical because those vaccines have expiry dates, they have costs associated with them, they have to be stored, etc. There's critical elements required to meet that particular aspect as well. So really, when you think about it, how should vaccine developers and manufacturers launch the 100-day mission? The critical thing is to prepare well in advance. Well in advance of a public health emergency, well in advance of a regional declared emergency, and that preparation needs to be potentially several years prior. It needs to be maintained. You can't just develop skills, you can't just develop vaccine manufacturing processes. They have to be maintained, they have to be upheld to be readily available and responsive accordingly. It could take many years, as I mentioned, and as we've heard earlier today as well, stopping the next pandemic is not something a single country or indeed a single organization can do alone. It takes an army to be able to respond, a global army to respond to an outbreak. It requires organizations, it requires governments and governance support. Financing, of course, is critical, and also organizations to work together. For example, as we did through the COVAX, where the WHO, CEPI, UNICEF, Gavi collaborated together to really drive forward vaccine supply, particularly to the AMC 92. Those countries listed by Gavi critically requiring vaccines and provision of COVID vaccines that resulted in about 2 billion doses of vaccines being delivered across something like 100 and something countries, 140 countries. So it's an incredible collaborative partnership that's required to really drive this forwards. So the key thing about preparedness is to start soon. There's a key element, there's a key phrase that says there's 2 good times to plant a tree. One is today, and the other time was 20 years ago. There's no point waiting 20 more years. It's critical to start preparedness today, and that's a key lesson that was learned from the COVID pandemic. Further details can be found, as ever, on CEPI's website. There's quite a lot of material there available, but certainly if you visit these portals, you can get much more information. But what I've summarized here is largely what's documented in the New England Journal of Medicine paper published in 2022 by CEPI. And with that, I'll stop, and thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Dr. Downham. Thank you.
Okay.
So I think that concluded all the presentation by the speakers today, and it gave us a very short time for the question and answers. So we have some of the speakers has had to run to the next session. So we have Dr. Wattle and Dr. Downham and Dr. Gordon, and also I think I can relay some of the things to the original speakers if you have any questions to the speakers who are not presenting here today. Any questions? Okay, I think then we can go directly into the networking sessions. So there is a coffee and cookies outside, so you can freely go out and take some coffee and come in and also freely discuss and engage with each other. Thank you. Thank you for coming.